Chairperson, distinguished delegates, luminaries. In fact, it's a matter of privilege for me to be here and participate in this eighth HIST. And in fact, I was thinking about this conference, and I had an opportunity 8 years back to organize the second HIST while I was working in Kumaon University in Nainital. I have chosen a very recent topic in which we people are working, the sacred traditions. For the last couple of decades, I'm working in Himalayan region, and particularly on environmental history, cultural anthropology. So I thought for the last few years, I'm exploring various areas in which the problem of resource management is going on, and particularly in the Himalayan region. In fact, we have been talking about climate change, we have been talking about the biodiversity, biocultural diversity, and depletion of all the natural resources because of the policies which we are adopting for our growth, or say whatever the paradigm of development we have adopted in past several years. If I see the whole paradigm of development and see the historical process, I see there was worldview that there was a kind of idea that mechanistic approach was taken as a model of development, where we saw that whatever is available in this nature can be exploited, can be used to any limit, to any extent, because there is no dearth. And later on, when Copernican ideas came, and again there was a shift in paradigm. And today, while we are in 21st century, we have been talking about the ecological paradigm. We have been saying that we all are in this planet a kind of web, a kind of machine where every component has its own way. So how this kind of approach has come up? How the paradigm has shifted from mechanistic approach to the ecological approach, and whether we can see any element of such kind of approach in our traditional thinking. So I am taking here the example of sacred and how the element of sacred or the notion of sacred was used for conservation as well as natural resource management. So it's a management technique also was experienced by several years of experience interacting with nature. I was encouraged with two very important studies done by Western scholars, though we try to sometime ignore or sometime do not want to acknowledge. But the youngest anthropologist, Tim Ingold, he wrote a very wonderful book, Perceiving the Environment. And recently there was a book called Plan B by Lester Brown. And when I was reading this book, I thought that whenever I go to my mountain areas and I interact with my community, so I could see whatever they are analyzing, whatever they are interpreting is available with the traditional knowledge or the knowledge which is with the communities. So was the idea of sacreds. And we are in a land of Gandhi, and Gandhi always said, Mother Earth has everything for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. This is the premise from where I want to go to my analysis. When I was working on this idea, I came across two very interesting folk tales. One from down south and one from the Himalayan region. how the communities they memorize, how the communities they communicate. There was a story from a Chola king, Perivalli, when he was going for hunting or maybe for some journey, he came very close to a water body and he was thirsty. He went to fetch water, and when he came back, he saw that the wheel of his chariot was surrounded by certain climbers. It was Nilotpal, a climber. And he realized that if I move this chariot, it will be uprooted. The Nilotpal will uproot it. So he left and he went back. This is the folk tale from the southern part. And there is another folk tale I'm taking it from the northern part, and particularly from the Indo-Tibetan borderlands, where the high altitude Himalayan valley, the Milam Valley, which borders China from Uttarakhand, there is a community called Nikhurpas. And the Nikhurpas were inhabiting the entire Johar Valley. He lit fire on that forest. And interestingly, the forest was of birch and juniper. And juniper is said to be the very highly inflammable green vegetation in high altitude Himalayas. Very close to the zero line or tree line, there are very few vegetations, shrubs and trees. So it was very important resource for the communities which are living in the high altitude areas. And interestingly, when we go through the official correspondence of the British officials, we observe in their reports that the Tibetans, because this area was also having a very traditional Indo-Tibetan trade activities. So people from Tibet were coming and they were very, very attracted, tempted with the resources which were available in that valley. A person every year when the trade is open, he was called Sarji, used to come to the valley, to any high Himalayan valley, and he was first confirming whether there is any epidemic, whether there is any disease with the cattle, and how much forest resources available in that area, so that he can invite his counterparts from Indian landscape to the Tibetan landscape. So one could understand the communities, how they were closely associated with their resources, be it for their cattle, be it for their own purposes, or be it for trading activities. So there was an economic importance of the resource. They wanted to conserve it. And how to conserve? Because there was a competition, many communities were there, many trading families were there, and they were trading with the Tibet. So they evolved an idea of sacred. And this sacred was not exactly the sacred grove which we talk often about, but these are the sacred forests which we call Devvan. And in high altitude areas, these sacred forests were called Shinguls or Sherong. These 2-3 types of practices which were evolved by these communities were also practiced by non-tribal, non-trading communities which were living in the lower elevations or in the outer Himalayan region. So what I think, so we have 2-3 questions in our mind. The mind of whether it was, when we are studying it, like the scholars who are dealing with the environmental history can say that, is this environmental romanticism we are talking about? It's a botanical idea, or the common sense of utilitarian nature, because we are utilizing the things and how we utilize it. I'm talking about this area since already he has reminded. I see when I have studies 153 samples in many villages of that region, I found that there are three categories. One category where these big forest patches were dedicated to a reigning deity of that particular area. There is no fixed time that when they started this institution. The second one is the tradition of managing forests through village communities or the Van Panchayats or forest panchayats. It's a unique institution in Uttarakhand region, but interestingly, after the depletion of resources or feeling the scarcity, the people, they also adopted. So that is why I am saying that why these strategies of adapting, these adapting mechanisms, how that they are evolving. The Ban Panchayats in later stage, and especially after 1980s, started offering their forests to a particular deity. And when these experiments were successful, people saw that the biodiversity of that particular patch is higher than the reserve forest of the government or the other areas. So they realized that these practices are very, very useful for conserving the biodiversity, and which is very important element if we are talking about the environmental scenario or ecosystem. And what happened? The typologically we see the another category that the government, which has several rules and regulations. In 1863, the forest department was established in this country. 1890, the Forest Act came, but it could not. Even in 1980, after the independence, we revised our Forest Act in this country, and we are talking about the preservation of the natural resources or conservation of natural resources, but it could not happen. And now the government, the Forest Department is also adopting the same process and is talking about that let us see that which is the prominent deity of that landscape and we should offer the forest to that. So the Department of Forest, which is talking about the scientific forestry, is also adopting the same mechanisms. So I am not going into the detail, I am just showing you a couple of slides. You see here in high mountains, you can see the terrain and you can also see that how the vegetation is growing. Now, this is a very important forest which is offered to the Nanda Devi. It is in Martoli village. And you see the thickness of the forest. Inside is the deity, Nanda Devi, to which this forest is dedicated. And the people are not allowed. It's a taboo to take anything, whether it is a dead wood or it is a grass or anything for personal or the private use. Anything which is a forest product from that particular patch is always used for the ritualistic purposes or religious purposes. Again, you see that how these deities are used. Now again, there is a typology among these deities that it is not offered to Ram, it is not offered to Krishna, it is not offered to any classical deity, but it is offered to the local deities. So there is a element of psychosphere, that a particular deity which can govern, which can rule, which can control the psyche of the community was offered all these resources. So one can see a number of examples. Now very interestingly, if you see this slide, you will find that here it's a very fragile zone in Kailash Mansarovar Yatra region where a couple of years back, there was a tragedy in Malpa where 300 people were died just because of the landslide. So people had a tradition to conserve the forest which is on the upper ridges of the settlement. You can see the fragile terrain here. And this is how people were understanding or using the notion of sacred to conserve the diversity or to conserve the vegetation of the region, not only to protect the vegetational diversity, but also to maintain
Dr. Girja, please go through the slides quickly because you have already crossed time.
Finally, I would like to just to give you an example that how the psychosphere is created, but I mean, it's a long, detailed study. I cannot come to the conclusion with just a couple of examples, but I would like to say that when we are studying the practices or the traditions and whatever is discourse available in international scholarship, We'll have to see all these traditions, how they work, and we should come out with some scientific. I am using the methodology of using quadrates to calculate the density of the flora available within that particular area, and then trying to compare with the other regions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.